I'm long since retired, and I'm chairman of the committee, and I'm on the Habitat for Humanity Board of Directors.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Rogers, committee member. Interesting enough, I have just been hired by the Green Mountain Habitat for Humanity to be their director of development. So incredibly excited to be working with that wonderful organization.
I'm Marla McQuiston, member of the Affordable Housing Committee.
Lynn Scott, and Energy and Community Development Planner for the town of Williston.
Should I go? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Jasmine Hurley. I am the Housing Initiative Director for the city of Winooski.
Folks online.
Monica, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Monica Rivero. I am a committee member, a resident of Williston, and I work for Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform.
Lisa?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Lisa Bradenharder, and I live in Williston, and I'm a member of the committee, and I look forward to tonight's discussion.
And Darren?
Hi, folks. I'm Darren Schiller. I work for the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and I'm here just helping support the Williston Housing Committee in getting started since you're relatively new, and also here to talk a little bit about, or to absorb a little bit about housing trust funds and help you maybe strategize how to set that up for Williston, or help set up the policy for Williston.
Thank you all. Are there any public comments that we need to receive at this point? Then, are there any comments on the meeting minutes from February 7th? There any comments, corrections, changes that you'd like to have in the minutes of the February 7th meeting? And I would entertain a motion to approve them as submitted. Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Go raise your hands if you approve, Lisa and Monica. Thank you. Minutes are approved. So we've invited Jasmine Hurley from the City of Winooski Housing Initiative. She's the director of the program to help guide us through a discussion of how housing trust fund policies.
Great. Well, I will start this off by saying there's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into the Housing Trust Fund, a lot of which precedes me. I've been there for about a year now, but this has been going on since, 2019. And I will say, it is a work in progress constantly. So I'm going to preface it by saying that we have made a lot of changes even since the version that you linked to send out to everyone. We have another red line version with more changes that have not yet been adopted by council yet, since we had to wait for the next council. So I will just say that as an aside. We're trying to kind of imagine this as a dynamic program. We've really learned that the housing market is so dynamic itself that it's really difficult to stay ahead of the ball for every single issue, and that we're trying to remain open to adapting and changing the programming as kind of the community needs. So just an aside to begin. So as I mentioned, our Housing Trust Fund was established in January of 2019. with the goal of providing financial assistance to incentivize the development, preservation, and improvement of affordable housing within the city. So our Housing Trust Fund offers both loans and grants for the creation of new affordable units, the rehabilitation and preservation of existing affordable units, and down payment assistance and interest rate buy down for first-time homebuyers.
Having problems here advancing the slide. What is that?
Maybe click.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
So kind of thinking about how the Housing Trust Fund was formed, the Housing Commission itself was formed in 2017. And conversations about utilizing kind of a pot of money that had been given to the city from VCDP loans that were old. The city reissued those out to private developers, and then once those were returned, only half had to be returned back. So we were able to keep those funds. So that's kind of where our original seed money came from. And then also the city has been making home improvement loans, just kind of for your average home repairs, pre-2010. So I'm actually not sure the year that that started, because our finance director, who's been with the city for a long time, says they predate her. So we've been issuing we call them HIP loans, for quite some time. And so those were being issued through just kind of a general fund. So there was a desire to have a specific fund dedicated to housing. So once the commission was formed, they established the Housing Trust Fund program in 2019, and kind of were tweaking it all throughout 2019. And all programs are through a partnership with Opportunities Credit Union. And that is obviously where we hold the balance of our trust fund, keep it all at one bank right now.
Do you have any other town money invested in the Opportunities Credit Union, or is it just this fund?
And I believe that also the money that we use for our small business loans also comes from Opportunities. But no, we recently started investing our reserve funds. So we're doing that through TD Bank because their CD rates are much better. I will say we did look at investing our housing trust fund, like, you know, I'll say this later. We have about $300,000. We thought about investing, you know, $250,000 because we're not issuing large loans frequently. But Opportunities being like a community bank, that's a lot more oriented towards like low income programming. Their CD rates are not competitive, so we would have earned, I think, $17 or something ridiculous like that. So it wasn't worth the effort. But yes, we keep it there because the program was kind of designed with Opportunities. It's interesting because it is like our programming, but it functions through Opportunities, so it's almost as if it's Opportunities programming. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but we are looking to expand, particularly for the home buyer programming to other lending institutions, just because for marketing it to the community, having it only at, you know, Opportunities, people get mortgages from banks all over the community. So we're trying to kind of expand our reach in ways, that we'll keep the money at Opportunities, but then we would do potentially.
It's interesting to me. To me, it's kind of a town fund
Mhm.
that it ought. I would think that the investment would be through the town treasurer instead of through a separate agency.
Yeah. That's
Worth
a
thinking about.
financial question, that's above
Yeah.
my knowledge. So when the Housing Trust Fund was created, there were really three target populations that were identified. So first-time home buyers, I'm not sure what the rate in Williston is. I'm sure it's much higher, but in Winooski, we are 60% renters. So extremely high, very low rate of home ownership. So kind of one of our priority housing populations is encouraging, you know, first-time home ownership opportunities. In addition to that, developers of affordable housing, obviously that's kind of a widely accepted target population at this point, considering the need for, you know, more building. So, and then there is a third group, which was low to moderate income owner occupants of single family homes and multifamily properties, which is a mouthful. But this is kind of the group of people who are lower income owner occupants of single family home or multifamily properties. Yeah. So the first program, we do have 4 now. It was 3 for a long time. We just passed the 4th one about 2 months ago. So the first one is the DPA program, so down payment assistance. I'm sure you're all very aware, this is a popular program that a lot of banks offer now. But it's for low to moderate income first-time home buyers, for assistance with the down payment for a first-time home purchase. So this is a $5,000 deferred loan. So it will be required to be repaid at sale or refi, or if the home purchase. So we do have that set as a loan right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we change it to a grant ultimately. We have had it set so that people who work in Winooski, so are employed in Winooski, they currently live in Winooski, or they have children at the Winooski School District, that they were eligible for a $1,000 grant and then only had to repay the $4,000. And so we do cap that at 120% AMI. I will say, since this came out in 2019, they did feel like this was one of the first ones, but I'd say now, today in 2024, there are many DPAs, and a lot of them are quite competitive. You know, the dollar amount is a lot higher, and some of them have interest rate buy downs built into them. And so we kind of market ours with the thought that, you know, you compare our DPA with other ones. If you're looking in Winooski, it's a specific like resource that can be utilized. Yeah, so this is kind of a tried and true. I will say it's hard right now because low to moderate income first-time home buyers are not buying homes in Winooski. I'm sure it's similar in Williston, but unfortunately, the market is just so competitive that it's really difficult for someone making 120 or below to be buying a home in Winooski. And that wasn't the case when the program was rolled out. Oh yeah.
Just ask real quickly, how do you market the program to those eligible folks? You know, do they hear about it when they're looking for homes? Do you talk to realtors, or how do you talk about it?
Yeah, so I will say this comes later. The program started right before COVID, and then we had a very large gap of not very many housing commission meetings, and we didn't have a housing or community development person for about a year. We had a vacant city manager. So things were very delayed until a year ago when I started. So there really hasn't been a very significant marketing push for our housing trust programming. It's on our website. I think it's been posted on Front Porch Forum a few times. Right now, the exclusive vehicle for people to find out about most of this programming, specifically the DPA, is through opportunities. So people who are going to opportunities looking for a mortgage, they tell them, oh, you're income eligible, you're looking in Winooski, you would probably be eligible to apply for this extra $5,000 loan to help with your down payment. So that is why we are looking to expand to other banks, because if we go, you know, to community bank, there's a community bank in Winooski, then people who are going there for mortgages, you know, it doubles our breadth at this point. And so, yeah, we edited our MOU so that there's no exclusivity required for our programming, specifically for the DPA and for the interest rate buy down program, which I'll explain in a bit. But once we finish kind of this round of tweaks, so I would imagine within the next month, we are planning to do a comprehensive marketing push. We've kind of had it on hold because we wanted to finish changing it before we market it and then change it. And we are planning, so our housing commission chair, her name is Jessica, but she is a realtor and has a realtor realty group. And so she, I think, is also the chair of the like Northeast Realtors Association. So we're gonna present to them so that they can be aware as well. If you're showing homes in Winooski, that's something you can let people know that this program is available. So we are kind of trying to think of ways other than just the lending institution. I do think that that is going to, will continue to be the most impactful because they're sitting there looking at people's finances. But I do think that like talking to realtors as well is helpful, so that they know like, oh, if I'm showing homes in Winooski, that this is like an available program, I should let people know. Yeah, so the marketing is a TBD, of course, with limited resources too. It's difficult to prioritize things that are not emergent. So the HIP loans, this was kind of our original programming available. So this is for owner occupants of single family homes and multifamily properties. When they're rehabilitating properties, providing homes for low to moderate income households. So the maximum loan amount is 30,000. It is a loan. I get a lot of emails from people thinking that our loan programs are grants. And so they must be renting to low income households. So the kind of idea of this is that it's more of a mom and pop, like owner occupied situation for them to maintain like naturally occurring affordable housing, and continuing to rent at affordable rates while still being able to afford maintaining the property. So the owner needs to be there because the idea was they didn't want essentially like a slumlord to be able to fund. I will say this is, we have considered expanding this because it is very niche. So yeah, it is a very specific like demographic of people that would be eligible for this. And we get a lot of people looking for the combination of this and our core program, which I'll explain next, but core is for developers. And so they don't need to be owner occupied. So we get a lot of people that are not owner occupied, but want to do home repairs. So it's like a combination of the two. And so, yeah, HIP is a pretty narrow scope. So this is one that I think we will consider expanding probably at some point. And we did recently kind of carve out, sorry, it's the next slide, actually. I was like, did I not write that? So for kind of the eligible activities for HIP, so this number one, this is the new language. It was previously essentially saying that we could fund like energy efficiency upgrades, which in theory sounded nice, but my boss, the city manager, asked me to go through our verification process. And I got to the point where I met with Efficiency Vermont and Vermont Gas. And I was like, I don't know how I would verify this. You probably know more about this. I'm not a science person, I'm a social worker. And I was like, I don't know how I would be able to verify any of this. And they were like, yeah, you wouldn't. Like this, we have, 10-person teams that go through this, and we have like exclusivity clauses where we cannot share information with you. And so we were really trying to figure out ways that we could pair it and partner it. And they were like, we can't let you know how much someone is reimbursed. So there was the issue of someone could like double dip into funding. So we took their advice and they said, you should probably just not be doing that. Like you should pull back because there's plenty of programming that is more money. And, like I think Vermont Gas has a loan program that has interest rate buy down. Like it's better deal than ours. And so we did change it that home repairs and updates needed to undertake energy related repairs or improvements through partner agencies. So for example, I think storm windows is a common one that VGS said there are like home related components that need to change oftentimes before people can undertake that program, and it is expensive. And they're like, that's one thing that people will go above the amount that our loan program can provide. So we have not gotten any like HIP loans in the recent years since kind of expanding on these specific categories, so we'll see if one happens. I'm hoping that we can kind of try to market a little bit more comprehensively to VGS so that they can let people know if they get someone that's looking to do storm windows and they need to do some home repairs, that they could be eligible for a loan through the city. So that's kind of her journey on that one. The second one is improvements needed for kind of ADA accessibility. 3 is the repair or replacement of major building components that are in danger of failing within the next 5 years. This list was actually twice as long and had a lot of other things like wall paint and kind of things that, again, I met with our fire chief and code enforcement team, and they were like, that's not anything we would be able to verify work done. So we kept it to things that either they could directly verify or someone from the state would be able to verify. So it narrowed down the scope a little bit, but number 4 is kind of our flexible. And number 4's language was narrowed a little bit as well. I think it just said before, it was something like something about quality of life, like it was something very vague that was a little bit like, okay, well, we don't want people putting in granite counter, you know, like, you know, lower income people deserve to have nice furnishings, but it doesn't mean that the city can use its limited funds to pay for whatever. So we kind of have that as enhance the quality of living and ensure that the units meet minimum housing requirements. So that was a little bit more broad. Final approval is always up to the housing commission. So we don't get a ton of these, as I mentioned, so maybe that'll change after.
Are
kind of our
there
marketing
published
push.
housing requirements that you're asking people to achieve?
Yeah, so
this?
minimum housing requirements is a code enforcement like standard. So anything out of that would be verified by our code team. Cause we do we have the public building registry. So we do the quarterly inspections of every public building, in the city, which is great. But it's a big program, so.
And with number 2, would this be for, you know, someone could have like an access ramp
Yeah,
or
yeah.
improvement to a bathroom to make it
Yeah.
accessible?
Yeah, granted it's 30,000, so it depends on like an elevator probably wouldn't be fully covered, but, yes.
But just, this is to build in accessibility. They don't necessarily have to have somebody disabled ready to move in order to. get that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Or to meet requirements of, you know, like state
Yeah,
requirements. if you
ADA
have,
requirements or.
Okay, so this is what we call core, but it's affordable housing construction and rehabilitation loans. I don't even really know where they got the abbreviation from, but that's what we call it. So this is for real estate developers, can be for-profit or nonprofit, public housing agencies, for when they're constructing or substantially rehabilitating housing for low-income persons. So this can be for homeownership or for rental properties. So this is kind of that broader, non-owner occupied, but it needs to be for the construction or to bring a unit that's not existing online. So it almost overlaps with HIP, but I think that's why people apply to the incorrect one frequently, because they're close. So we allow a max of 10K per affordable unit. This is a loan, and then it can't exceed $100,000 for a single project. So that would be someone doing 10 units. So this could be for construction, land acquisition, hard costs, conversion, of non-residential structures, purchase or rehabilitation of existing substandard multifamily housing units that do not meet minimum housing code. And then we have the required affordability period, essentially equal to what the loan term will be. So 30 years would be 30 years, but if they wanted to do like a two-year, they have to at least commit to 5 years of affordability. Yes, and we score that's one thing that we have changed as well in our scoring criteria. Is that we have changed like more points for the lower AMI the units are. So if it's 80% AMI, it's 1 point, but if it's 50% targeted AMI, that's 3 points. We do have like a point grading system in the criteria. It's in the policy guidelines that you sent out. I wouldn't say, it's not like all these programs are insanely competitive because, you know, we have a small community. So they're more, I'd say, for internal decision of like, is this project worth the limited money that we have rather than like this one is better than this one. But yeah, core. Yeah, I've had a couple of people, actually Habitat applied,
Oh.
but they thought it was a grant.
What's that?
Whoops.
Classic. They Habitat applied, but the predecessor, I forgot her name, but she applied and then I had to say, oh no, this is a loan. And she was like, no. And I was like, do you still want it? And she was like, no. So yeah, I was like, unfortunately, if it was a grant and we could give up to 100,000, that would deplete our fund by a third. So it's tough because I think there are, you know, for big construction projects like that, is a 10,000 per unit is like a drop if it's costing $500,000 to construct a unit these days. So I did have someone reach out recently. They're interested in utilizing the rental revolving loan fund from VHFA, so utilizing that funding, and your application is scored higher if you utilize municipal funding or match. So I'm sending them this because that could be considered municipal match, even though it's a loan, not a grant. So while it's probably not like the easiest money that they could get, it would indicate municipal match. Yeah, so that is core. And then, oh, I didn't put it in. I don't know. I didn't put it. We also just recently added an interest rate buy down program. So we have not, we're finishing the MOU right now before opportunities will be able to offer that. That was kind of our recent addition, to try to combat or be flexible to the needs of the market of like interest rates are so high. How can we help people? So it is a buy down based off of their credit score. And then obviously the city utilizes our funds to kind of weigh that risk, that opportunity to take if someone has a lower credit score. But that is a $5,000 grant. We decided grant because we aren't having a ton of people utilizing our program. So at this point, we were like, we don't need to just hoard them. Like, let's start doing grants. So that is a $5,000 grant. If you move out any years before 5 years, or if you refinance, or if you sell your house, or if you start renting it or short-term renting it, something like that. Actually, sorry, we do not allow people to short-term rent while you have a loan, but if you move out of your primary occupancy, then we require you pay back based off of how many years you live there. So it's kind of like with each year you live there, it's $1,000. And then once you've been there for 5 years or over, it's a full grant. That's just to kind of ensure that people are not like turning and burning, which they aren't these days, but yeah, so that's kind of our new addition. We're allowing people to pair that with the DPA, so they could get, you know, $5,000 grant, either $4,000 or $5,000 loan, and pair those two together. So that is not technically being offered by Opportunities yet because we had to finish the MOU, but it should be this month. So we're finally getting it out, hopefully before interest rates drop. But yeah, that was kind of our new idea of how can we try to navigate this crazy market right now, because the down payment is kind of helpful, but when the interest rates are so high, it's not that helpful for a lower income person. So we'll see. It's technically on like a 1-year pilot. So after a year, city council will look at it and say, do we like this? Are interest rates still high, or do we want to increase the DPA or reallocate those funds? So like I mentioned, trying to kind of be flexible and follow what the community is kind of indicating it needs. So sustainability of funds has been kind of a very important part of this. So as I mentioned, it's around 320. It's been like that for a while, but we have not necessarily had any sort of replenishing funds going back into it. We don't get an allocation from our city. Winooski is a very bare bones government. We do not have any sort of cash that could go towards just like a blanket housing trust. So we, at this point, revenue includes interest on any loans coming from housing trust fund. That's not like a significant amount. The VCDP loan that I mentioned was our initial kind of seed money. We do have one more that will be coming back in 2035, so. Yeah, and then our kind of new update as of last month is that Winooski did pass a short-term rental regulation. So we are going to be instituting a short-term rental license system that requires short-term rental operators to register each year. And it will cost $250 for owner-occupied short-term rentals and $1,400 for non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Those numbers were closer when we first wrote it, but city council really was very motivated to disincentivize as much as they can the investment in short-term rentals in Winooski. So that we have about 95 at our peak short-term rentals in the city, which is actually a lot. It's like 2.3% of our housing stock. Yeah, so, and we jumped from 30 in 2022.
Wow.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
I'm surprised there's so many.
Yeah, I think it's just proximity to Burlington, I guess. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know why, and like a little bit cheaper maybe, but still like urban, I guess. But yeah, so we do also have a mechanism that we wrote in that council will be able to set a cap on non-owner occupied short-term rental licenses after a year. So we don't really know like the makeup of owner occupied versus non-owner occupied right now. We need to take the year, have people register, do a lot of outreach and education, get that list finally, and then council can say, okay, we have 50 investment Airbnb properties. We're putting the cap at 50. We're not gonna allow any more licenses, but if people stop doing it, then they can return their license and other people can get those licenses. Yeah, we don't have the resources to do, for example, what Burlington did or what South Burlington is looking to do, where they are going to make like existing non-owner occupied short-term rentals illegal at one point. We have a very overstretched code enforcement department because we run the rental registry. And so that was just not an option. So capping it kind of allowed us to not have to do like a pre-existing non-conforming sort of situation. So the idea came from our planner, so.
Do we have any idea what the Williston,
How many STRs there are? There's, maybe, I don't know, 20 or so. There's not a
Yes.
huge amount. I mean,
Yeah.
we've done a little bit of research, and there's it looks like a lot more when you go to like the, Airbnb or AirDNA. But about a lot, I don't know, maybe about, 15 or 20 of the ones that are listed are actually the Sonesta suites. That they
Oh,
list
right.
on our,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Air, whatever.
VRBO or something.
Yeah, but yeah, we've been kind of, trying to get a handle on the numbers
Yeah.
because the planning commission is concerned about
Mhm.
STRs and they don't want to be in a situation where there's a lot of like non-conforming
Mhm.
and where the town is like, suddenly clamping down on them, but it's sort of too late because there's a lot of them and
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's where we're at. Yeah, we actually have more than South Burlington.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyways, it at least will bring forth income each year to our housing trust fund. So in a way, we're requiring that if you're going to negatively impact the housing market, then they're sort of paying back into that through those license fees.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I will say, I mentioned we are exploring inclusionary zoning right now. I'm not sure where that's gonna end up. If we do end up with any sort of payment in lieu option, that will definitely be funneled into this fund. I think right now we're leaning towards not offering that since Winooski so built out that development is very far and few between. We get maybe one about every 2 years. So allowing people to pay out of the inclusionary zoning kind of defeats the purpose of the inclusionary zoning when
Mhm.
there's so few developments that are going up.
Yeah.
But I will say, if we consider doing like a payment in lieu for a 5 to 9 unit building, some of the smaller scale, then that would go into this. And then as I mentioned, the interest from investing, depending on if our funds grow more, then that could be an option. Or if we end up exploring ways to invest at other banks, but
Mhm.
right now, that's kind of where we're at. Maybe someday we'll end up getting an allocation from council each year, but it looks like probably not at this point.
Huh.
But it does feel good to have at least the short-term rental income coming now, because having nothing was, I think, led people to say, okay, let's do like $5,000 loans and make them so small that it almost, I feel like, wasn't worth the work of people putting in for, you know, the application process and some of the other requirements we have for the programming, for affordability terms and things like that. Yeah, I will say, I think people are starting, well, I'll let you go to the next. Yeah, so looking at funding issued, we've by far done the most HIP loans, because that has been kind of a historic program. There have been 14 total, there are 2 still in repayment. We've had a couple of DPA applications. One loan was issued with, they were able to do the $1,000 grant, $4,000 loan. There's been no core, and IRB is new, so that has not come to fruition yet. So I will say, there are several reasons I think that the program has not, I don't know, maybe been utilized as much as people would hope. One is definitely the marketing side of things, so we haven't really done a marketing push. I did speak with our former chair, who is still on the Housing Commission, but he was obviously a huge part of building this program. And I think he is at the point where he feels a little bit like we spent so long nailing down each like specific little nuance, and like we do have a very fleshed out program. And so, but we are now to the point where we're like, well, we're gonna finish these last updates, do a really big marketing push, see what the uptick is like, if there is any. If not, we might start looking towards like, maybe once a year we put out an RFP and say, we'll give, $50,000 to the best project. Start looking at doing more kind of lump sums of money for projects that, are gonna be beneficial in the community. Yeah, just trying to kind of be dynamic and think about how we can best utilize money. But yeah, it's difficult. I guess I probably talked about that on the next slide, maybe. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
so,
okay.
yeah, challenges I mentioned, like timing was an issue with COVID. Marketing and advertising, yeah, we'll see this summer. Hopefully, we're able to do some comprehensive marketing and education opportunities. As I mentioned before, there's definitely other funding programs that have similar products. Yeah, our former chair also mentioned, he was like, we were like one of the first DPAs, and now everyone has a DPA. And, some of these programs were really exciting when they first launched, and then now are common in the community, which is a good thing that they're available, because it doesn't matter if it's our money or someone else's, as long as it's, you know, helping people get to the end goal. And then, as I mentioned as well, the housing market right now it's very difficult. You know, construction costs are insanely high. So even for people who are looking to do like the HIP loans, like just the material costs and everything is just so much money right now for interest rates too. It definitely makes it a little bit more difficult, And then kind of, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Looking towards kind of our future, as I mentioned, looking at expanding to other banks, marketing push, continue exploring options for partnering with similar programs. You know, so cross kind of marketing. VHIP obviously is a huge kind of statewide initiative that's happening right now. So we want to continue looking at like, can we use our core funding and pair it with VHIP, or can we use our HIP funding and use it with VHIP? Like, how can we like pair these together? Could someone use those as the, people need to come up with their own chunk of money. I forget what it's called, the match. They need to come up with their own match to participate in VHIP. So like, could people use this money to be part of that match? I think as density requirements kind of loosen with Act 47, I think a lot of people are starting to consider ADUs that never had before and are able to do ADUs when they hadn't been before. So we're definitely interested in looking at those opportunities and how can we continue expanding those, kind of talking with, you know, CHT and the state. Luckily, the director of the VHIP program from the state is on our housing commission, so it makes it easier. But yeah, like how can we have them know, you know, you have someone apply for Winooski, then be like, oh, there's this Winooski money that, you know. So, and then as I mentioned, like RFPs for lump sum funding, like, cause it gets to the point where we don't want to just hoard our money, like maybe we should consider, you know, how can we get this out to the community for projects? And then something else we have discussed as well is lump sum funding awarded to organizations looking to expand their portfolio for shared equity homes in Winooski. So this is actually Taylor's idea from CCRPC, but he mentioned one time was like, have you guys ever considered just like giving money to CHT to buy a triplex or something like that? Like giving money to someone or Habitat, you know, for them to expand their portfolio for kind of the shared equity, because at this point, you know, we are encouraging the development of any sort of housing. So we do want to encourage home ownership opportunities in Winooski. So that is something that kind of our zoning regulations give like bonus opportunities for. But a new build condo or apartment or anything, that's not going to be affordable to the average Winooski resident. So the shared equity model is really like something that we want to try to cultivate in Winooski, because it allows, you know, current renters in Winooski and current residents to be able to, you know, buy in Winooski and then, you know, move on to, you know, bigger normal mortgages later on, kind of in their home ownership career. Like Butternut Grove was a great example of like what we would love to continue fostering. Since, you know, so many people, one of our city councilors moved in, and someone on my housing commission, they were able to buy and they live at Butternut Grove because of the shared equity, model. Actually, the one person that used the DPA to move into Butternut Grove, which was a nice kind of combination. So yeah, we're trying to think broader scale a little bit too of, okay, no one's done it this year. We can say, what do we want to do with like $50,000, or what do we want to do with this? Try to be a little bit more, maybe broad, bold with our, with our funding. So yes, that is the Housing Trust Fund. Constant work in progress, I would say.
Impressive. That's a lot though.
Yeah.
For sure.
Questions?
It's a lot to remember. And since people aren't applying, we're not like processing applications
Well, I noticed
a
that
lot.
you said you'd had many applications for the for the affordable housing construction rehab loans. You'd
Yeah,
given 0 grants.
yeah, so the issue with that is we've had 3 people apply thinking it was a grant. And it says loan in the documents, but I do agree it could have been more explicit. So we actually went through immediately after the Habitat one. I was like, all right, we need to be twice as explicit. So I had our communications director go through and put it on the website, loan grant, like bold it. And I put it in our applications a lot more clearly as well. But yeah, for that one, since the money amount is higher, that is kind of like, that has to be a loan, unfortunately. For some of these smaller, like down payment assistance and interest rate buy down, I think it's a lot easier for us to say, okay, we'll give you the $5,000, it's fine. But yeah.
It sounded to me as if everything that you had except the interest rate buy down is a loan, and $1,000 of your down payment assistance that could be a grant, and the 5K could become a grant if.
Yeah, I think we will probably end up making that a grant at some point. But yes, the rest of them are loans. And part of that has been because we didn't have any like money
to
coming back
replenish
in.
that.
So people had some
Replenish.
sort of like, money anxiety of like, well, what will happen if we spend all this money? Then we won't have a housing trust fund. And we certainly do not have it in the budget to reallocate funding to replenish that. So I think having that income is a big relief. I think we're thinking it'll be like 70K a year now going back in, which is great. We are filling in kind of a hole in the code enforcement budget, with I think like 8,000 of it. Which makes sense because they're the ones that will be doing all the enforcement for people who are in violation of the ordinance. But so I think we can relax a little bit with like how we're looking at allocating funding, now that we actually have sustainable revenue. But yeah, so you're correct, mostly loans.
So you're looking at about $75,000 or $80,000 coming in from the fees on short-term rentals.
Yeah, that's what I hope. I think we're conservatively estimating 50 because we don't wanna overestimate, and you never know what people are gonna do. We're hoping to have a higher rate of compliance than Burlington because ours is essentially a registry right now before there is a cap put in place. It's not like the most intense regulation. So we're hoping that we will get less pushback from people who are upset. Granted, I don't think anyone wants to pay $1,400 a year, but they did come to that conclusion we multiplied the average nightly rate by 7. So, it's 1 week out of 52.
Okay.
So, yes, let's say 50. But yeah, it was originally, I think we had said 800 for the non-owner occupied, and council kept raising it, which, whatever, it's more money, so. That made it a lot easier to hit a solid amount of money. Yeah.
I have a question a little bit on marketing as well.
Mhm.
I know Winooski has relative to a size, a fairly large immigrant and refugee population. Have you really pushed this program with them? I know a lot of people are looking,
Yeah.
finding ways to gain
Mhm.
home ownership as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would say everything from a communication standpoint that we do is very entrenched in, like community engagement. Obviously with refugee and immigrant community, because that is a huge part of our population and kind of our like community identity. Translation, all of that good stuff. So, I mean, I wouldn't say specifically no, because we haven't really specifically done any sort of marketing. We definitely will. Again, it's hard at that community because the gap between renters and homeowners, just in general, not even just with that community, is just like widening seemingly by the day. So it's difficult if there's no shared equity opportunity. Like, that's why I like the Habitat triplex that's getting built is so fantastic, because otherwise, like, people cannot afford $550,000 home for a starter home that's like a duplex, or, you know, I saw there was a tiny home condo being sold at $250,000, and I think it was like
gosh.
600 square feet or something
Wow.
crazy. So while that is, like, we don't wanna make a sweeping, like group anyone together, but the average refugee or immigrant is not like going to be able to jump from renting, especially when renting is such a burden to most people these
Yeah.
days. They're expending so much of their income. Jumping from that to where home prices in Winooski are now is very difficult. So we're definitely trying to think of ways of even considering, while it's great to give an individual $5,000 towards their down payment, would it be more impactful to give $50,000 to CHT or Habitat, and they build a triplex that is perpetually affordable, and that could provide homeownership opportunity for more than 3 people, you know, looking at the span of like 50 years, that could be many people that are able to attain homeownership status, rather than just the one person. So kind of trying to think maybe more macro level of like, where can this money really be utilized? Not that it's more important than the individual person, because I think they're both important, which is why we try to like span like the individual level, and then kind of the medium level, and then the developer level, which is the intention. But yeah, I think for core, $10,000, there's a lot of hoops to jump through for $10,000 a unit from like a developer perspective. So I think unless it fits the exact project, like how I explained for the VHFA project where they need a municipal match, then it's not probably going to be utilized. But I don't think that we have enough funding to really give the kind of money that we would need to a private developer, if that makes sense. Because they're like, I'm gonna get a loan at a better rate somewhere else, you know, or just from investors. So core is one that I'm like, that one also might be reimagined into like the more macro level of like, let's do an RFP, or let's give money to this organization and they're gonna do this with it. So yes, many conversations that we're having.
Lisa, please.
Yes, yeah, my question, I mean, one thing that came out about Williston and the housing needs assessment that Melinda did a terrific job on was that we have a huge mismatch in our housing stock and our population. So Melinda knows the numbers better than me, and I never get them right, but it's like 60% of our housing stock is 3 or 4 bedrooms, and 60% of our household size are 1 or 2 people. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I wish we could switch. We have the opposite problem.
Yeah.
Right, but well, so I guess that was going to lead to my question about, so I think our situation is just having big houses that people stay in much longer than they need. So that would either point to housing for folks to downsize into, you know, I'm in my 60s, a lot of people talk about leaving Vermont when they hit their 60s, when they want to downsize, because there's nothing smaller to move into. So, you know, there's those kinds of things, or, you know, some conversation about subdividing bigger houses or ADUs or that kind of thing.
Yeah, the subdivision, that was my thought, but we have the exact opposite issue. We have a lot of large multi-generational refugee and immigrant families. It's a very distinct population in Winooski where they need 3, 4, 5 bedroom rental units that also need to be affordable. So we put all of our incentives are affordable 3+ bedroom. That's not really what developers want to build. Cause in a normal market, that's not, like, people usually transition from the 2-bedroom rental unit to buying a single family home or buying a townhouse or something like that. So that's interesting that that's the opposite. Yeah, I would think maybe like subdivision, or, I mean, I'm sure you guys are all over like home share and things like that, but it's such an issue too with interest rates are high, like people don't want to move and then have a 6% interest rate when they have one that's 2% or.
Exactly.
Or they're paid off.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you want to
I just
essentially?
don't want to have to clean out my cellar.
Darren.
Well, it's just interesting to think about that dichotomy between the two communities, and that it seems like there's an opportunity for someone to maybe put two and two together and say, let me buy your, large home, rent it to the immigrant family that needs it at an affordable rate, and I just need a little incentive to do that. So just planting that seed for Williston to think about potential incentives to use your housing trust fund. Not that you want to, it would be ideal if the immigrant communities can stay in the communities where they've been settled, but maybe there's opportunities in other places too. Maybe there's ways to support that still keep people connected.
Yeah, pretty good public transportation in at least some of the areas, right? Some of the more
We have
populated.
two, bus lines, one, that goes along Route 2 from Taft Corners into Burlington.
Okay.
That's like the most utilized one.
Mhm.
And then, and it does a little bit of like around Taft Corners, it goes to the Walmart. and
Yeah.
Mostly that's where people
Mhm.
who take the bus into Williston from Burlington are going. They're
Yeah.
taking the bus to Walmart. From what I've heard anyway. And then there's another line that goes up to Essex Junction.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's basically those two lines.
Yeah.
We did, do a study last summer of, of the feasibility of developing a microtransit service,
yeah.
but it's very expensive.
Yeah. I know, we had just had GM2 come.
Yeah.
Kind of sad. Yeah, we don't have a bus line to any grocery store, so, yeah, that transportation is the only thing that pops into my mind is slash the school system is pretty, that's the hard part is
Yeah.
people are so concentrated and when you see, but the resources are also there, so some people I think are happy to have the opportunity to move elsewhere, but some people it's,
It's hard because in country Vermont, you need to have a car. You
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
And so there's actually a lot of programs being developed that help immigrants and refugees get their
Mhm.
licenses, but then you still need to
Yeah.
make that jump and actually purchase a vehicle.
And they're very
Yeah.
expensive these days.
Mhm.
interest rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Efficiency Vermont has incentive programs to get an electric vehicle.
That's true.
Right.
And
That's
my
hard to
last
be
car
there.
cost twice as much as my first house, so.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
funny. Oh.
This is. So what? If you were just starting your program now,
Mhm.
as we are ours,
Yeah,
how would you start?
good question. Well, I didn't start a first one, but I did meet with the person who did, and he did say he wished they had spent less not arguing, but like being so meticulous about every little detail and every little criteria, and he was like, I wish we had just gotten it out. Granted, I think he had regrets because they spent like a good part of a year like trying to make it perfect, and then COVID happened. So I think he had regrets that they were like, we should have just done it and been a little bit more fluid and seen like what the community needs, because at the end of the day, like the loans and the grants are like they're allocated by the housing commission, like they have to have final approval, so if it's a bad application or not a, sufficient use, like obviously they can decide that at any point. So I think, he had wished that they were maybe a little bit more bold in just kind of moving forward with things rather than getting stuck in little minutia and the little details. Cause I mean, our program is very complicated. I'm the one that looks at it the most. And every time someone asks me questions, I have to pull out the draft and look because I don't wanna give incorrect information and they all kind of float around the numbers in my mind. But yeah, and I mean, as I said, like, we might end up going totally more simple of like giving money to people rather than having all of these qualifications and requirements and, I think we have the intention of making sure that the money is spent in like responsible way and to the parties and the functions that we desire and want to encourage within the municipality. But on the other hand, we may have made it too complicated for the average person to be able to read or use or successfully apply for funds. So trying to, yeah, I've been trying to ask community members to read, like I've had a couple reach out to me asking about like HIP or the down payment program. And they've given suggestions of like, that doesn't really make sense, or that's confusing. So we've been trying to, make the reading level be, I think we try to do 7th grade. Which sometimes we just can pop that into ChatGPT and say, check
Yeah.
this for 7th grade reading level. Especially in Winooski where we have a lot of, English language learners or people who just don't speak English. So that's definitely like a big part of things, is making sure it's accessible to people and that they understand it. Yeah, because we had someone that they're on our housing commission now, actually, but they were looking to use HIP for their own property. And they were like, I work in construction and this does not make sense. So it's things like that where I'm like, that's very helpful for us to be able to understand. Yeah.
Lisa, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And there's a lot of background noises. Sorry about that. But I was wondering if you see a value in kind of an early win, because I think one challenge is that this is such a daunting thing. And, and so we're a new housing committee. And so, even I think like, even if we got one ADU that was built, and had a story to tell people, what the value would be in that. Just to sort of have one win, right? No matter how small it is.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing that came to my mind when you first started speaking was ADUs. Especially I feel like in Williston, like that's just kind of the thing on people's minds right now. Like I think we had 2 people call our planner today asking about ADUs. Like people are motivated, I think, by like a collective understanding of like our housing crisis, and then also like realizing like, oh, like I could actually fit, like I don't need all of this space. Like my neighbor Jerry, he has an ADU and he really likes it. Or and then obviously programs like VHIP are so helpful in providing funding for those. Yeah, I feel like that's probably like a very ripe opportunity. We're definitely trying to look towards how we can kind of contribute to that conversation right now, because I think it's yeah, it's like that in short-term rentals. It's like what people want to talk about.
Yeah.
I know that there's a state program that helps low-income first-time home buyers, and our Habitat affiliate had a family take advantage of that, and it made it so that their half of a duplex became affordable at somebody that was under 40% of the median income for the area, with the grants that had come through Champlain Housing Trust, plus the grant that came from that first-time home buyer. It seems like it's great. Nobody who's under 40% of the median income is gonna apply for a house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Telling people that that's possible, and they just don't have a sense that it is.
Yeah, yeah, I think CHT is one as well for their, they have like a BIPOC first time home buyer program. We wanna look at how can we partner with them as well. But yeah, it is hard because then it's like, well, suddenly you're stacking all of these, like it probably feasibly can be done if you stack all of these resources available. But like the average person making 40% like AMI does not have the time or the resources or the knowledge or maybe even the confidence to
Confidence in the system.
understand, put all that together. That's like a full-time job, is like assembling that like piecemeal of programming.
Yeah, managed to work in one through the CHT.
Yeah, we definitely, I don't know what parts, co-marketing or, helping people, like telling people you can do VHIP plus core, or you could do, HIP plus, whatever, like giving that information to people of like this plus this equals like, this is what you can do, rather than like individually marketing things and having to expect people to put them together.
Leveraging, telling people, showing people how to leverage funding.
Which is complicated, but.
Yeah.
I think that our experience has been that that Champlain Housing Trust does much of that for people that go through Champlain Housing Trust.
yeah, they're definitely,
So making them aware of your programs.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, once we hopefully get this finished, then we'll feel better about. Yeah, that was part of the issue. We have like all these complicated criteria, but for some of them, no one has ever successfully applied. So these are processes that we have not gone through. And so it's like easy, I think, for people to create like a criteria and be like, that works, but then in practice, it might not. So that's been kind of some of this as I've been trying to go through and say like, okay, does that make sense still, or do we want to change this? Yeah, like for HIP, it was like, that's great that we want to be able to offer all this, but we can definitely not. I was like, I'm not I can't verify plumbing work, you know? So, yeah, trying to make sure it's feasible administratively. But I'm a one-person department, so.
So have you given grants for renovations,
For HIP or for,
any of your programs?
for renovations, yeah, we've historically given, 14 of the home improvement, loans, which is for essentially renovating, existing units.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, that has been historically widely used, I think less so now. So, yeah, again, I think that the story of the medium to low income owner occupied property owner is less common potentially than it used to be. I think with like kind of the consolidation of real estate and wealth kind of that's been building is that it's more likely that they're non-owner occupied and they own multifamily buildings or they own many parcels in the city than someone that lives in a duplex and is, you know, medium to low income themselves and rents to low income people. It kind of stacks all of these requirements. And we've found it difficult to find people that are eligible for all of those. I think potentially before the home improvement loans were maybe broader. Like they probably were just like, if you're under this income, then you're eligible. Where when they redeveloped it, they really wanted to be specific, like targeted funding. We don't want to subsidize like a handy situation, something like that. And people who have, you know, low quality housing that is probably not meeting minimum housing. And then kind of just subsidizing them, neglecting their property, a situation like that. So we are kind of exploring like, where could we find an in between? Because right now the requirements are, you know, it's unlikely that you are making 120 AMI or less if you own a multifamily property. So some of these numbers are starting to get a little bit less likely to happen upon. And when the population gets smaller and smaller, people that are eligible, then, you know, the population of people who actually would apply, go through it, all be approved is even smaller. So I won't, like, I do think it's nice to kind of add all these bells and whistles of like, this is every single thing that we want. But I think maybe sometimes just saying, okay, like, let's just narrow that down a little bit because we're making it too specific. Yeah, but these are just kind of my personal experiences of seeing people apply that are almost eligible, but are not quite. Like, we are getting a lot of the non-owner occupied that want to do HIP activities, like with existing rental property maintenance and upgrades, things like that, rather than like, I'm constructing a unit or I'm rehabilitating an entire unit and bringing it online. So it's kind of like people want the core HIP baby, which, yeah, we'll maybe consider, maybe we should combine them, you know. I think, yeah, for the group that has spent a very long time, like, on this programming, they are very open to, like, I have been there for much less time than many of them, and being the staff person, obviously, I'm leading a lot of the change, but everyone's been very amenable and flexible to to kind of modifying their, what was once kind of their baby, so I'm very appreciative of their flexibility.
I guess one of the take homes I'm sensing or getting out of this is that it might be beneficial to sort of develop a draft policy that's just allow, you know, that has some flexibility built into it rather than getting like really, you know,
Super
super
specific.
specific.
Mhm. Yeah, because at the end of the day, like, you wanna get money out to people
Yeah.
who are doing good for housing in the community.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wonder if like you could do, I don't know, I'm sure you're already considering things like this, but like a community event of like, what are people looking for, like
Mm.
support in? Is it ADUs? Like, is it, what are like the specific like situations that you would really appreciate like funding for? And then looking at how can we make programs based off of, not that you should do it for each individual person, like this is Jerry's program, but you know, maybe we could like look, what are people saying they need? And then like, let's direct our attention towards that. Cause there's obviously there's a lot you can do.
No, we don't have very much money.
Yeah.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Way less than you do.
Oh, well, we
Yeah.
feel like ours is low too.
Yeah.
When I go to meet with Burlington, I'm like,
Yeah,
they're like, how much do you have? I'm like, well, not enough to buy a house.
You could buy a
Yeah.
habitat house easily.
Yeah, true.
Almost two if you get enough CHT grants.
Yeah, that's true.
So you had a sense that you wanted to do two things. You wanted to expand opportunities for low-income people, and you wanted to improve the quality. You wanted to bring the housing stock in your city up to some minimum standard. Is
Mhm.
that a correct assessment?
Yeah. We're definitely very focused on quality in Winooski. I think some people have said too much so sometimes, but we do, I mean, we have the quarterly inspections, so obviously some fall out of compliance every 4 years. Most should be up to ideally a certain level. We have very old housing stock though, and when you see like a lot of it is very, very old, so we do wanna, you know, aim on having like that minimum housing standard met, obviously, that's like a big kind of value of the city. But I think a big part of that is that those are usually the like naturally affordable units or units that are not owned by like a nonprofit or public housing agency, and they rent to people with vouchers. So I think by being able to preserve like the lower quality housing stock, we're able to preserve that. Cause I think once it gets to the point of not being able to be preserved anymore, it just ends up getting sold and redeveloped,
Mhm.
which is fine sometimes, you know, like, I think once we get to a place where we're inclusionary, that'll be less of a stressful process. But I think most people are well aware that Winooski's had its share of gentrification over the years, so. Yeah, that is like it is the preservation of kind of housing quality and the affordable, but they overlap as well, I think.
I don't have a sense in Williston that we have that same need to bring rental properties up to some minimum standard. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, because most of the rental stock is
Mhm.
pretty new,
Yeah,
very new.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
South Burlington just
And there's not a
passed
lot
their
of
rental
older.
registry, which I was a little surprised by. I
South
was under the
Burlington.
impression they're maybe not as new as Williston's, but I was under the impression they had fairly new housing stock too.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Maybe.
think
Wow.
some of the rental stock is older,
Mhm.
like. You know.
I guess that's true down.
There's a lot of
South Burlington is always like more expansive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live like 3 blocks from South Burlington, but.
Yeah, yeah, I mean. I think in Williston, like. There are still places in Williston where I think there's an opportunity to. Preserve naturally affordable housing, like I'm thinking of. Up along 2A, like all those neighborhoods that are pretty old, you know, smaller houses, and I don't know, so like. I mean, isn't one of like what CHT does is like, if, you know, if somebody wants to sell to them
Mm.
and then they can. That house becomes part of their Oh, the shared equity,
shared equity, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is true.
So that's, I don't know, that's one possible like opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder if you could have like a funding program for like subdividing units. I don't know how expensive that is. But like, I don't know if that's like a targeted need. I don't know, maybe if the community says like, I'm overhoused, you know, maybe people are not as inclined to need like 6-bedroom homes anymore, maybe.
Yeah.
I only have 4, come on.
I think the bigger problem though is then if they sell,
Yeah.
there's nowhere to go. If I sold my house, I couldn't afford to live in Williston.
Yeah, or subdividing and moving into one of the units is what I
Yeah,
was
right,
thinking.
Right.
Although a lot of them are not really.
Yeah, I know, cause I've lived in
Subdivided
like
houses.
chopped up
Yeah.
units before and
Yeah.
they get pretty funky, but, and then you do need to
There's-
add like another kitchen.
Well, what if we could convert some of those places, on the west side of 2A, every 10th house in the neighborhood into owner occupied perpetually affordable housing? Is that a possible dream?
I suppose, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, you know, that's one, what's one opportunity, I mean, is, if, Champlain Housing Trust was willing to like buy, you know, a house or,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it'd be worth talking to CHT about how they are expanding their portfolio and where they're going. I know that
Yeah.
managing their home ownership or their shared equity program, you know, is an administrative burden for them. So they
Mhm.
might need, you know, maybe the housing trust fund is directed towards their administrative costs or to some of their acquisition costs. But one other thought, you know, just occurred to me as you were talking about converting that housing stock to, or pairing the ADUs with this need for the overhousing problem is have someone move into that ADU, rent out the main unit to a larger family that needs it. And, you know, that's essentially what VHIP does, the Vermont Housing
Yeah.
Improvement Program. So you might also, you know, I think that program is going to get funded again under our, the current, there's a bill in the legislature that's looking at that. So consider whether you need to duplicate that program or not, but keep that in mind as an option, or just market that program better to Williston residents. Say, hey, do you need to downsize? And here's an option.
Right, and maybe provide like, I don't know, like, I don't know if they have match requirements, but provide
they
like
do.
It does,
a
yeah.
portion of the match or something
Yeah.
like that, you know?
Yeah, or like, no, I'm thinking, I'm like, should we do this? Hosting like a VHIP like learning session or something like that, like, cause people are very, from my experience, have been very interested in that. And I would imagine it would probably be easier to utilize in Williston than in Winooski, just because of how dense it already is in Winooski. But yeah, that is definitely, I mean, I think recently they had a big story about like someone in Montpelier where they used VHIP and built an ADU and then they moved, or I think maybe they are renting the ADU because there is the requirement. You rent to someone from coordinated entry, which is the homeless list.
Right.
Or through USCRI, so the refugee, organization, and then they have like a plan to age in place, and then
Right.
we'll eventually move to the ADU. I think that's definitely like a popular, idea for people to be able to like stay on their property, potentially continue owning it.
And one other challenge with VHIP that I've heard of is just the amount of work someone has to do to get to a point of being able to apply, not
Yeah.
just the program application, but I need to hire an engineer, I need to get this septic system inspected, I need to do X, Y, and Z. There's all these little things that add up. So maybe Williston's local fund could be used for those pre-development costs that the program, you know, the VHIP doesn't cover, but that someone needs to get to that point.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I did, it was just a while ago now, but I met with Sean, who's now on our housing commission. He runs it from the state perspective, but I met with the CHT person, I think his name's Charlie as well. And I talked about their prioritization matrix, because obviously, I think they're opening funding mid-March for VHIP like 2.0. Hmm. It's competitive and they get more applicants than they have funding for, at least the last few rounds. And he did mention that, I asked if income was like any sort of part of the prioritization of like, maybe we should, maybe you should prioritize people who are like lower income, who need the funding more. But from what I recall, that wasn't part of it, and they had project readiness as like a pretty highly ranked part of it, so I was like, well, would that not favor like experienced developers who continue to like return and utilize that funding over and over? And they said yes. So I think maybe that's something that they would consider thinking about in the future, but I feel like right now, the energy from the state is just like, get as many of these done as possible with like, use all the money and like,
Yeah.
which I understand, we are in somewhat of an emergency. But
It was aimed at
yeah.
getting housing stock that was
Yeah.
below
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
use back on
Yeah.
line.
Yes.
So I think that this is just, for me, it's been a really valuable discussion.
Mhm.
I do need to move toward wrapping it up, but what I'd like everybody on our committee to think about is, now that we've heard what Winooski is trying to accomplish with theirs, and more than how they're going about it, the defining the goal, we need to start thinking about what kind of goal we want to have for our housing trust fund. So as we go through the next month and the next meetings, why start writing down your ideas? Because we could have a list of 50 ideas of things we want to accomplish and narrow it down to like Winooski did, and perhaps get going in some direction. Does that sound reasonable?
It does.
Okay, then, does anyone have anything else for Jasmine before we wrap this up?
Jasmine, as soon as I get my new work email, I'll be in touch to make
Oh, yeah.
another contact, because I'd love to learn more.
Yeah.
Get some more specific ideas as well.
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
need to modify your plan so you allow habitats.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm meeting with the PG next
We
week,
do
so
have two
we'll see.
duplexes in Winooski
Yeah.
that I'm aware of.
I know, and that's even, like, the CHG model is obviously great, but that one's even like
Mhm.
cooler because of the people who live in them, like, worked on them. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for
Yeah, of
coming. I
course,
really
yeah.
appreciate all the help
course.
you've given us.
Happy
Yeah,
to
thank
kind
you
of,
so much.
I'm always a fan of crowdsourcing information.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely like
Yeah,
keep you posted as to.
yeah, we'll see. Ours might be something totally different in yours.
Yeah, very interesting.
Well, happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah.
So, we have two things on our, front agenda for other business. The first is housing fact sheets.
Sure, and did you wanna look at any of these questions, or do you wanna leave it for the next meeting? The questions, that let's see,
Put together.
the questions that I put together about, Williston's housing trust. You want me to just throw them up on the screen? so
That'd
you
be
can
great,
look them
yeah.
over? Okay, I did do this poll, but I think let's save it. This Mentimeter poll,
Oh, right.
and we can just look at the questions. And,
What is
So-
a Mentimeter poll?
well, so it basically takes these questions and it would ask you to answer, like, it would basically be a poll of these questions, in your opinion, on what you think the housing trust fund should do regarding the questions, and just to get like an instant sort of pulse of what people are thinking, but maybe we could just save that for next time.
I think so. I think it would be good if you would send this out, not just as a link,
Yeah,
but the data, so that we can all take a look at it and have a good discussion of it.
sure. So yeah, so, kind of the questions you know, do we wanna limit funding to very low and low income households? Or do we wanna have it be for also moderate income, up to 100 or 120 percent AMI? And then there's, you know, we talked a little bit about possible ways to use funding. You know, so, and then added to that, funding for homelessness prevention. And then grants to make existing units accessible, grants to alterations to existing homes, to create, new housing units or including ADUs. Subsidies for weatherization or other energy efficiency upgrades and affordable housing. Subsidies for affordable units within otherwise market rate development projects. Down payment assistance, supportive housing. Purchase of land or preparation for land for affordable housing projects. Municipally funded construction of housing, capacity grants to organizations like CHT. And then there's, you know, there's some that I hadn't thought of that, you know, so I don't know, something to think about. There's
Yeah.
a lot, there's a lot there, and you don't kind of want to make it overly complicated, but yeah, I think Charlie, you're so spot on, like thinking about what the goal is. You know, so maybe that should really be the focus, like what is the goal? Darren.
I don't want to sway the committee one way or another, but I think looking at what Winooski has done for their programs and what other communities have done with their trust funds, I think it's important to focus on the thing that Williston is unique to Williston that other programs may not service and may not provide the gap, or may not have gaps that Williston can fill with this fund, or the thing that is a highest priority for the community. If you look at what your town plan says or what's going on, you know, I'm thinking, for example, about the number of workers in Williston who can't afford to live in Williston. That's a really unique challenge because of the amount of employment in the community. So I'm not sure which of these or others would solve that, but that's what I would encourage the committee to think about as a priority, or as a way to prioritize your decision.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Yeah, and I think, Melinda, when I'm looking at these, I mean, I always love data, that's a side of me, but some of these things would have to be new construction, and some of these would be changes to current housing. Like if you're talking about, you know, supportive housing, or, you know, ADA accessible housing, there isn't anything right now. So to me, it's like, what would be completely new housing, which is a different way to fund things versus what would be tweaking our current housing stock.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to include that as you look at these things.
Yeah, and then there's also, you know, kind of after what Winooski has done and other places have done, creating different buckets for the housing trust fund, like maybe one bucket could be to support sort of large new construction projects by an affordable housing developer. Maybe another bucket could be supporting smaller projects that are more targeted towards preservation of naturally affordable housing, or like accessibility modifications in affordable housing or something like that. But that's just, you know, kind of one way you could go.
Well, that's why deciding among ourselves and getting concurrence from above of what it is overall that we're trying to accomplish, so that we can develop programs toward what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And these are all useful in helping us look at possibilities.
Yeah.
And I think Darren is right on that it needs to be Williston specific, not Winooski
Right.
and not Elmore, but Williston.
I really liked, I'm sorry, but what Jasmine mentioned about a survey, potentially surveying what do Williston residents perceive as the greatest need.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a.
That'd be a good way to like combine that with a VHIP session or other ways to more education on affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah, so like, you know, if you wanted to invite, some of the VHIP folks to come and give like a presentation or something or an event, and then, ask people to like, I don't know, complete a survey or something on their way out the door, or like
During the thing.
during.
Or you
something like
saying,
that.
those little dots, put your
Oh, that's
sticker.
nice.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good idea to have like yeah, to have a dot survey or something. Yeah,
Another thought I just have, and I know it's more at the top of the forum, was talking about area mean income.
mhm,
Some of the conversations we had in Burlington about this is the need to really find housing even for people at that 120%, because there's just very little programming for them, but they still, to get into permanently affordable housing, need that option at that
yeah,
level of income.
yeah, nowadays, especially. Mhm. Yeah, and then, you know, so I think, right, like sort of thinking about more broadly, like what the goals are is the first step. And then, you know, I kind of like spit a whole list of stuff out, including, you know, eligibility requirements and priorities, and so maybe that comes later.
I think so.
And, yeah,
I also liked, you know, your thoughts on, you know, really preventing homelessness. And that's what, you know, Eugene did with some of their housing trust fund money
Yeah.
was, you know, kept over 100 families, in their housing during the pandemic when people lost their jobs. You know, one way we can prevent homelessness here in Williston is by making sure it doesn't happen in the first place, by keeping people in their home.
yeah,
Well, now they might even be like, you know, limits on rent increases and caps on. That kind of stuff, too.
We do have some homeless population in town, but I think that it's come in from outside, but it's not, that it hasn't grown from within the town. At least that's my understanding.
You don't know.
Yeah, that's an issue with Burlington. Yeah, a large portion of the homeless population are not people who became homeless in Burlington. They're from all over the region.
yeah.
And you can't blame them. They're
Well,
seeking
they-
their
That's
services.
so where services are,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, we've, there have been folks, camping out in storage units in Williston, stuff like that, so.
In storage units?
Mhm.
Okay, where?
You all,
Oh, okay.
and then there's many, like a mini storage, it seems to be, it's like a
Yeah.
booming industry,
Yeah.
and in Williston, there's just like a whole crop of
Every
mini
corner,
storage units
practically,
popping up
yeah.
all over the place, so,
Yeah.
you know, that's definitely something that's cropped up.
So the assignment for next month, in addition to what we have going on with a builder coming in to talk about what his cost of building is to come in with an idea or two about where you think that we want to go with this. And we'll try to put all those down on a piece of paper and then, and leave room to expand it. And then figure out how to narrow it down to a couple of points. Is that reasonable? Is there anything else tonight? You had this other business down?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just share, like, so you guys had mentioned last time about like creating fact sheets, so
Mhm.
I kind of went ahead and
Wow.
I worked on creating one. And, you know, you can, if you click on that link, you can sort of see it and look at it, but this actually took a surprising long amount of time to just do this one thing. This double-sided fact sheet just about housing affordability and
So yeah, this graph is just plotting median household income, the blue, and household income needed to afford a median priced home in the red. So you can see that gap from about 2000 on, getting bigger and bigger. So, I don't know, it kind of tells a story.
Can we put that on Front Porch Forum like once a week?
Yeah. And then just, kind of, I mean, you can look at it, and if you have comments, you can send them along to me. But talking about rent and then just housing cost burden.
And include property taxes.
Yeah, it does include
Okay.
property taxes. Which is a hot topic these days. Anyway. And then, the other thing I wanted to bring up was just that Fair Housing Month is coming up,
When is it?
April. And I'm actually working with the library to do an event, there. I think it's gonna be a film screening, although we haven't a film screening and discussion, although we haven't nailed down what film we're gonna bring. If anybody has.
I saw something recently in the middle of that.
But that's yeah, Darren.
Sorry, I was gonna wait till you were done talking about Williston Fair Housing events. So if you are,
I am, that was just it.
so I just wanted to also make a plug for CCRPC's housing convening in April. Let me get the date while I'm talking. Is going to be focused on the Rothsteins, Richard and Leah. They are going to be coming to Burlington and doing a talk at Main Street Landing. They've written 2 books. The one is the thank you. And they're just coming out with a newer book. I think it's called
Action.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to be hosting a couple of events, or sorry, we're hosting one event. Other programs are hosting other events related to that. But mark your calendars for, I believe, April 4th is when when the Rothsteins event is at Main Street Landing. There will be some book groups for those books, and then our housing convening. Sorry, looking through my calendar and not seeing it, but I'll get that information for you. You'll get Melinda will get notified of this, so just keep an eye out.
Yeah. Are you guys all on the listserv for, striving communities or something?
Oh,
Or,
the housing thing?
yeah,
Is that the one that sends us the
Community.
notice of the monthly
yeah,
meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, okay. Yeah, so they'll send out, notices for fair housing activities too, I'm sure.
And CCRPC's event is April 18th.
Okay, April 18th.
In person at the Winooski O'Brien Community Center, and we will provide dinner.
Oh, wow, great. Huh. Cool.
Where's the O'Brien Community Center?
Isn't that like on Mounts Bay Ave? Yeah,
Correct. So if you go west out of the circle on the main drag, past the police station, and after you take the little bend, it's just off to the left.
yeah. Yes, right. And that big sort of shopping, it looks like a little shopping center area.
Where the Hannaford's is?
No, I don't think there's a Hanford there.
No,
There's
We'll send
Winooski.
directions.
What's that?
We'll send directions.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they'll send directions. It's where my doctor's office is.
Okay. Do we have anything else that we need to discuss today?
I'm just curious. I may have missed some part of the conversation, but as far as prioritizing the use of housing trust fund and what the committee wants to do with that, it sounds like you're going to digest for a little bit and maybe come back at a future meeting to discuss. Is that what I heard?
We have an agenda set up that we're going to learn about what it costs a builder to build a house, a market rate house, on April 3rd, and on May 1st, we're going to have a follow-up discussion on the Housing Trust Fund, developing a policy. So we're gonna come back next week and or next month, to our April 3rd meeting, and we'll each have a couple of ideas of what we think that it should be, that we'll just write down and not discuss. We'll save the discussion for the May 1st meeting. And that, then we'll go through 2 months. And then we have someone coming in from Champlain Housing Trust Fund to talk to us about, how they cooperate with us. So we have it planned out for the next couple of months.
Got it. Cool. I will pay attention to, I'll be at the April meeting and maybe the May meeting. Great.
Yes,
All right,
if there is no further business, then I would, declare the meeting adjourned.
all right, cool. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you all.
Yeah, Lisa.
I'm feeling really good about this
Yeah.
meeting. I hope the rest of you are too.